Zara had never known freedom. From the moment she was captured, her life had been a long, painful string of endless labor and cruelty. The mining colony on the distant planet was nothing more than a prison disguised as a workplace. The air was thick with dust, and the heat of the planet's twin suns beat down mercilessly on her and the other slaves. The endless hum of machinery and the crack of whips was a constant reminder that they were nothing but tools in the hands of their masters. Zara's kind, the Altrians, were known for their strength and skill in combat, but those qualities had been the very reason they were enslaved. Her people had once fought to defend their home world, but they had been defeated. Now, Zara's people were sold like cattle, forced to dig into the rock beneath the planet's surface, breaking apart minerals to fuel the machines of their cruel overlords. Her own chains were rough and tight, cutting into her skin as she moved from one task to the next. The overseers, humans mostly, didn't care about her species' heritage or the strength they had once possessed. To them, Zara and the others were less than animals, nothing more than tools to extract precious resources. She had seen countless others fall to exhaustion, their bodies broken and discarded like trash. Zara had once been a warrior, proud and fierce, but that life felt like a distant memory. Now all she could do was endure. As she lifted another heavy load of ore, Zora's thoughts drifted. She remembered the stories her mother had told her when she was younger, of Altrians who had fought for their freedom and honor. Those memories, though, felt like a different lifetime, one she would never get back. She had learned not to dream of escape. It was too dangerous. Too many others had tried and failed, their bodies now scattered among the mines or tossed into the dark abyss of the planet's oceans. But there was something inside Zara that refused to die, something that kept her pushing forward, even when it felt like the weight of the universe was pressing down on her chest. It wasn't hope, not anymore. It was survival. No matter how many times she was whipped, no matter how much pain she endured, Zara refused to be completely crushed. She kept moving, step by step, one task after the other. She could hear the laughter of the overseers in the distance, their mocking voices cutting through the air. It was the sound of her misery, and it filled her with a bitter rage. She wanted to scream at them, to fight back, but she knew it was pointless. The fear of retribution was stronger than any desire for revenge. But today, something was different. As Zara worked, her gaze shifted toward the entrance to the compound. A large transport ship had landed, and a man in a dark cloak stepped out. At first, she thought nothing of it. A new buyer, perhaps, come to purchase more slaves. But this man was different. There was something about the way he carried himself, an aura of quiet confidence that set him apart from the others. His eyes were sharp, focused. He wasn't like the usual traders, greedy and self-serving. Zara couldn't help but stare at him as he walked toward the overseers, his steps purposeful. He didn't seem afraid of the hostile environment. He almost seemed to own it. The overseers, who usually treated all visitors with disdain, actually seemed to step back as he approached, their expressions shifting to something that looked like respect. What struck Zara the most, though, was the way he looked at her. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and for the first time in a long while, Zara felt something stir inside her, a flicker of something unfamiliar. It wasn't pity or even curiosity. It was as if he saw her, truly saw her, and something in her chest tightened. But before she could think about it any further, the moment was gone. The man and the overseers were speaking now, but Zara couldn't hear the conversation. She was too far away, her focus still on the stranger. She had no idea why, but she knew that this man would change something. She didn't understand how or why, but Zara felt a strange pull toward him, a sense that for the first time in years, something might happen that could alter the course of her miserable existence. Hours passed, and Zara's thoughts returned to the harsh reality of her life. But just before the sun set, casting long shadows across the mine, a heavy metal door creaked open. A voice called out, and the overseers stepped aside. Zara's heart skipped a beat when she saw the man standing there, now in front of her. "You," he said, pointing toward her with a commanding gesture. For the first time in her life, Zara didn't feel like a slave. She didn't feel like a broken thing. She felt seen. The man's gaze never wavered as he spoke again. "I want her." And in that moment, Zara's world shifted. Zara stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had expected another slave to be picked, another piece of property to be sold. But this was different. The man's words rang in her ears. "I want her." She didn't understand. Who was this man? What could he want with her? She had been nothing more than a broken slave for so long. She couldn't remember what it was like to be anything else. For a brief moment, she thought she might have imagined it. But the overseers, who normally ignored the slaves, were suddenly moving with purpose. One of them, a tall, cruel man named Vec, walked toward her. His hands gripped the chains around her wrists roughly. "Come on, girl," Vec sneered, jerking her forward. "The buyer wants you." Zara stumbled, barely keeping her feet beneath her. She wanted to ask the man why he had chosen her, but the words wouldn't come. There was only the feeling of fear, of confusion. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had seen too many others dragged away by cruel buyers, only to return broken or never return at all. The man, standing tall and confident, watched silently as Zara was led to him. His dark cloak fluttered in the wind, and there was an undeniable air of authority around him. He didn't speak again as Zara stood before him, still in chains. His eyes moved over her, scanning her from head to toe with an intensity that made her shiver. "She's the one," the man finally said, his voice calm and steady. There was no hesitation in his words, no second thoughts. It was as though he had known from the moment he saw her that she was the one he wanted. The overseers, though shocked by his decision, didn't argue. They were used to the rich buyers choosing whatever slaves caught their eye, and they were always eager to get the transaction over with. Zara had been marked for sale for so long, it had become a part of her life. But now she could feel something strange happening. A shift in the air. Vec handed the man a thick, leather-bound contract, and they exchanged credits, the value of her life calculated in cold, hard currency. The man didn't seem bothered by the price, nor did he show any emotion as the deal was sealed. For Zara, it felt unreal. What was happening? Why was he doing this? The chain around her wrists was unlocked, the cold metal falling away from her skin. She stared at the man, unsure what to do. She had been in chains for so long, the absence of them felt almost unnatural. "Come with me," the man said, his voice gentler now, though still firm. He turned and began walking away, expecting her to follow. Zara hesitated for a moment, but something in his presence made her want to trust him, even though she had never trusted anyone before. She followed him, keeping a few steps behind, unsure of what to expect. As they walked out of the mining compound, Zara felt the weight of the place lift off her shoulders. The sounds of the overseers yelling at the other slaves faded into the distance, and for the first time in a long while, she breathed in air that didn't feel heavy with despair. The man led her to a sleek, silver ship parked just outside the compound. It gleamed in the fading sunlight, a stark contrast to the grimy, rusted surroundings of the mine. The ship was nothing like the clunky transports that came to the planet to pick up slaves, or the dirty cargo ships that brought supplies. This was something different, something powerful. As they approached the ship, a hatch opened automatically, revealing a warm, dimly lit interior. The man gestured for her to enter. Zara stepped inside cautiously, unsure of what to expect. She had never been inside anything like this before. The air inside smelled clean, almost fresh, and the seats were plush, unlike the hard, uncomfortable ground she had grown used to. "Sit," the man said as he motioned to one of the seats. "I'm John." Zara hesitated for a moment, then slowly sat down. She felt like she was in a dream. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had treated her like a person, let alone a human being. She had been treated like an object for so long that she wasn't sure how to react to kindness. John sat across from her, his piercing blue eyes studying her carefully. His presence was calm, almost magnetic. Zara found herself unable to look away, despite the confusion swirling in her mind. "Why me?" Zara finally asked, her voice quiet but steady. "Why did you choose me?" John didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, looking out of the window at the fading light of the planet. "Because you're more than what they've made you believe you are," he said. Zara's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "You're not just a slave," John said softly. "You're a warrior. You've forgotten that, but I can see it. I can help you remember." Zara blinked, unsure of how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. No one had ever seen her as something more than the broken slave she was. John turned to her again, his eyes serious. "I'm not here to take advantage of you. I'm here to give you a chance to be free, to be who you were always meant to be." Zara felt something stir within her, something deep down that she had long thought was dead. It wasn't hope. It wasn't belief. It was the beginning of a spark, one that had been buried beneath years of pain and suffering. For the first time in a long time, Zara felt like she could believe in something again. Something real. And she knew, somehow, that whatever was about to happen, her life would never be the same. Zara had always dreamed of escaping the mines, but she had never dared to imagine something like this. As the ship sped away from the desolate planet, her mind was a whirlwind of confusion. The harsh red skies of the mining colony were far behind now, and ahead was the unknown. The man who had bought her, John, was silent as he piloted the ship, his eyes focused on the controls. Zara sat quietly in her seat, her hands still trembling from the strange events of the day. The interior of the ship was unlike anything she had ever seen. Soft, comfortable seats, a clean, sterile smell in the air, and glowing panels lining the walls. It felt like a different world entirely, a world Zara had never even dared to dream of. Her life had been filled with dust, sweat, and pain, but now there was nothing but a strange, new silence. "Where are we going?" Zara finally asked, her voice breaking the silence. She didn't know why she was asking. Maybe it was a need to understand something. Anything. That was happening to her. "We're heading to my ship's headquarters," John said, his voice calm but reassuring. "You'll be safe there. You'll have time to rest, recover, and learn. Things will be different, Zara." Her name felt strange coming from his lips. It was the first time anyone had called her by her real name in so long. She didn't even remember the last time she'd felt like Zara, a person. She had been called slave for as long as she could remember. John glanced over at her, sensing her unease. "I know this is a lot to take in, but trust me, this is the first step towards something better." Zara wanted to believe him. She really did. But how could she? She had been treated like dirt her entire life, and now this stranger was offering her. What? A second chance. A life of freedom. It seemed impossible, too good to be true. The ship's engine hummed steadily as they traveled through the galaxy. Zara couldn't help but watch the stars outside the window, a sight she had never seen up close. The mining colony had been on a barren, lifeless planet, surrounded by nothing but dust and mountains. But now, there was nothing but the vastness of space. She thought back to her old life. The cold chains, the endless work in the mines, the overseers who showed no mercy. She had been a prisoner, with no hope of escape. Now, sitting in this strange, clean ship, she felt like an imposter, like she didn't belong here. But John had offered her something. He had bought her not for his own benefit, but because he saw something in her. He saw what she had forgotten about herself, her strength. Hours passed, and eventually, John broke the silence again. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I'm here to help you." Zara turned to look at him. "Why? Why help me?" John didn't answer right away. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. Finally, he spoke again, his voice gentle but firm. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything, to feel like you have nothing left." Zara frowned. She didn't understand. What did he mean by that? He was a human. He couldn't possibly understand the pain she had endured, could he? "I used to lead a rebellion," John continued as though reading her thoughts. "A long time ago. I fought for freedom, for the right of everyone to choose their own fate. But in the end, it all fell apart. My people were crushed, and I was left alone. I've been fighting for the freedom of others ever since." Zara's eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't expected that. John, the man who had freed her, had once been part of a rebellion. Had he fought to free people like her? "I know what it's like to be betrayed by those you trust," John added, his voice growing quieter. "And I know what it's like to be seen as less than human. But I'm telling you, Zara, you are not worthless. You are not a tool. You are a warrior, and I can help you remember that." Zara didn't know how to respond. She was still processing everything he had told her. Could she really be a warrior again? After all this time, could she reclaim the strength and pride that had been stripped from her? The thought seemed both impossible and tempting. As the ship moved deeper into space, Zara could feel the weight of her past lifting. She didn't know what John's plan was, but for the first time in a long time, she felt the faintest spark of hope. She had been treated like an animal for so long, but now she was free, free to be something more. By the time the ship landed, Zara was a little less afraid. She was still uncertain, still overwhelmed by the enormity of the change in her life. But there was something else, something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of curiosity, a desire to see what came next. John led her off the ship and into a new place, one that felt safer than anything she had ever known. The building was sleek and modern, filled with soft lights and quiet spaces. It didn't smell like the mining pits or the stench of other slaves. It smelled like peace. "We'll start tomorrow," John said as they entered the main hall. "You'll train. You'll learn what you were meant to do." Zara nodded, still unsure of what to expect. But something inside her, something deep down, told her that this was the beginning of something big. She didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to walk it. She wasn't afraid to find out who she really was again. The next morning, Zara awoke in a soft bed, the first time she had slept in anything but a filthy, hard cot for years. The room around her was simple, but clean. It was nothing fancy, but it felt like luxury compared to the cold, barren rooms she had lived in back at the mining colony. The walls were a smooth, calming blue, and there was a small window that looked out into space. Zara sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. The night had felt like a dream, like she might wake up back in the mines at any moment. But she was still here, in a place that seemed like a world apart from her old life. The memory of John's words the day before echoed in her mind. "You're a warrior. I'll help you remember." She wasn't sure if she could believe him, but something deep inside her said it was possible. She had been strong once. She had been part of something bigger than herself, something worth fighting for. Could she find that strength again? A soft beep interrupted her thoughts. A small display screen beside her bed flashed to life, and a voice came through. It was John. "Good morning, Zara." His voice was warm but commanding. "Are you ready for your first day of training?" Zara stood up, taking a deep breath. It felt strange to hear someone speak to her like that, like she had value again. She had spent so many years as an object, something to be used and discarded. But now it felt different. She felt human. "I'm ready," she replied, surprised at how confident she sounded. "Meet me in the training room," John said before the screen turned off. Zara quickly changed into the clothes provided for her. They were simple, nothing like the ragged garments she had worn as a slave, but they fit her well and were comfortable. The soft fabric of her new outfit felt like a reminder that she was no longer in the mine. She walked down the corridor, her footsteps echoing in the quiet hallways of the building. As she approached the training room, she could hear sounds of movement, grunts, the thud of fists hitting pads, and the clanging of weapons. When she stepped inside, she was greeted by a large open space filled with various training equipment, padded mats, punching bags, and several different weapons displayed along the walls. John was standing in the center of the room, looking calm and focused. He nodded when he saw her enter. "Good. You're on time." "That's important," he said. "Today, we'll start with the basics." Zara's heart beat faster as she approached him. The room smelled like sweat and exertion, but there was no fear, no sense of oppression here. This place was hers now. She had a chance to take control of her life. John motioned to a set of pads hanging from the wall. "We'll begin with combat training. It's important to learn how to use your body before you pick up a weapon. Focus on balance, agility, and strength." Zara nodded, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. She hadn't fought in years, not since the war on her home planet had ended. But she had trained before, and her body still remembered the movements, even if her mind didn't. "Start with the footwork," John instructed. "Step forward with your left foot, then your right. Keep your knees bent, your body low." Zara followed his instructions carefully, unsure at first, but growing more comfortable with each movement. She felt the old muscle memory kick in, and a strange confidence began to build. It felt good to move like this again. She had forgotten how much she missed it. John observed her closely, offering corrections when necessary, but his voice was always calm, patient. "Good. Now, let's add some strikes." Zara's hands balled into fists as John demonstrated a series of punches. Jab, cross, uppercut. He moved fluidly, and for a moment, she was mesmerized by the ease with which he demonstrated the moves. He wasn't just teaching her how to fight. He was showing her that it was possible to reclaim her strength, to become something more than just a victim. She took a deep breath and began to follow along. At first, her strikes were awkward, uncoordinated, but with each repetition, they became more precise. The power she had once wielded in battle began to return to her, slowly but surely. "Good," John said, his eyes gleaming with approval. "Keep your movements sharp. Your body is more powerful than you remember. You're stronger than you think." Zara felt a surge of pride as she landed a solid punch on the pad. She hadn't realized how much she had missed this feeling. The rush of power, the sense of control. In the mines, she had felt like nothing more than a broken tool. But here, in the training room, she was beginning to feel like herself again. John moved on to show her basic defense techniques: blocking, dodging, and countering. Zara followed his lead, her movements growing more confident with each lesson. It wasn't easy, and she felt sore by the end of the session, but she also felt something else: alive. For the first time in years, she felt in control of her own body, of her own destiny. By the end of the day, Zara was exhausted, but she couldn't deny the small flicker of hope that had ignited within her. She wasn't just learning to fight again. She was learning to live again. As she wiped the sweat from her brow, John walked over to her, offering a bottle of water. "You did well today," he said, his tone kind but still firm. "This is only the beginning, Zara. You have a long way to go, but I believe you can do it." Zara took a deep drink from the water, feeling the weight of the day settle into her muscles. But it wasn't a burden. It was the feeling of progress, of reclaiming the person she had once been. She wasn't just a slave anymore. She wasn't just a broken piece of machinery. She was Zora, and she was ready to fight for her future. "I'll be ready," she said, her voice steady. John smiled. "I know you will." One night, while rummaging through John's belongings, Zora's eyes catch something unusual: a folder, tucked away at the back of a drawer. Her curiosity gets the best of her, and she carefully opens it. Inside are files. Documents encrypted with codes Zora doesn't understand, but one file stands out. It's labeled with a name that she recognizes: John. As she reads through the documents, a chilling realization creeps in. John isn't just the caring, brave human she thought she knew. He's someone entirely different, a former soldier, a warrior who once led a rebellion on a distant planet. His life has been full of violence, struggle, and a mission much grander than Zara could ever have imagined. She reads about his past, a past that is far darker than anything she could have guessed. John had fought for the freedom of enslaved races across the galaxy. His rebellion had crushed some of the most powerful alien regimes, but it had also made him a target. His entire existence had been a fight for justice, for freedom. But Zara realizes with a jolt that his fight is far from over. The rebellion may have ended in victory for some, but the war is still alive in John's eyes. A sudden realization strikes her. She's been a part of this plan all along. John didn't just rescue her from the alien slavers. She's one piece of his much larger strategy. Zara isn't just a victim of circumstance. She's been carefully selected to be part of something bigger. The files reveal a shocking truth. John has been preparing her to fight. At first, Zara feels a wave of awe. John is a hero in his own right, a man who has given everything for the freedom of others. But then fear quickly replaces that awe. This is a war unlike any she's ever known. John is preparing her for something immense, something dangerous. Her life as she knew it is gone forever, and the weight of her new reality sinks in. She's not just caught in a struggle between alien species. She's now a warrior in a galactic battle that could change everything. The more Zara reads, the more she realizes the enormity of the situation. This war is not just about her survival. It's about the future of countless other lives across the galaxy. John's rebellion, his fight for justice, it's all connected to her. She's not a pawn in his game. She's a key player. But what does this mean for her? Can she live up to the warrior that John believes she can be? Zara closes the folder, her heart pounding in her chest. She's terrified, but there's also a spark of something else, something stronger. The future is uncertain, but one thing is clear. She's no longer just a victim. Zara is a fighter, and soon, the galaxy will know it. Zara's training grows more brutal with each passing day. John pushes her harder, teaching her everything he knows about combat, strategy, and leadership. She trains with alien weapons, learns advanced techniques for stealth and sabotage, and studies the history of rebellions that have shaped the galaxy. The physical toll is immense, but Zara's resolve hardens. She's becoming something she never thought possible, a warrior. But as Zara grows stronger, so does the danger around them. John's rebellion is beginning to make waves, and their enemies, once content to ignore them, are now taking notice. Intelligence reports pour in, detailing the movements of alien warlords, slave traders, and corrupt governments. The galaxy's power players are preparing to strike back. Zara begins to realize the full scope of her mission. She's not just training to defend herself or to fight for her own freedom. John has chosen her to lead other enslaved races in their fight for freedom. With each lesson, her new purpose becomes clearer: to unite the oppressed, to tear down the regimes that have built their empires on the suffering of others, and to bring justice to the farthest corners of the galaxy. John's eyes gleam with pride as Zara embraces her role. He reveals a shocking truth. Her people, the once proud warriors of her home planet, have not forgotten their heritage. For generations, they've been enslaved, but their warrior spirit remains alive. Zara is their hope. With John's guidance, she can be the leader they need to rise again. Zara feels a heavy weight settle on her shoulders. The stakes are higher than ever. It's no longer just about her own survival. It's about a revolution, about a galaxy that's been torn apart by greed, corruption, and cruelty. Zara isn't just fighting for herself anymore. She's fighting for every enslaved race, for every prisoner of war, for every broken soul. The rebellion's momentum builds, and soon, the time for action arrives. John's network of freedom fighters has gathered their forces, and they prepare for their biggest assault yet: a direct strike against one of the galaxy's most notorious slave markets. This market is a symbol of everything that's wrong with the galaxy. The buying and selling of sentient beings, the destruction of entire cultures, the annihilation of hope. Zara leads the charge. Her people, now united and armed, follow her into battle. The massive complex looms ahead, guarded by armed mercenaries and deadly security systems. The plan is set: a full assault to cripple the market's operations, to free the prisoners, and to send a message to the galaxy. But as Zara approaches the battlefield, she feels a strange pull, a sense of foreboding that she can't shake. The closer they get, the more Zara is reminded of the ghosts of her past, the memories of her people in chains, the horrors she endured before John rescued her, weigh heavily on her mind. This is no longer just a battle against the corrupt systems of power. It's deeply personal. It's a fight against everything that has tried to break her, everything that has taken from her. As the battle begins, Zara fights with everything she has. She leads her warriors through the chaos, cutting down enemies with precision and determination. The slave market is a fortress, but Zara and her people are unstoppable. Every strike, every victory is a small step toward reclaiming their dignity, their freedom. But the real test comes when Zara faces the leader of the slave market, a ruthless alien warlord who has profited from the suffering of her people. Their confrontation is fierce, a battle of wills as much as of strength. In this moment, Zara is forced to confront not just the external enemy, but the ghosts that haunt her, her past, her fear, her doubts. With John's teachings echoing in her mind, Zara draws on every ounce of strength and courage she's gained. She faces her demons and emerges victorious, defeating the warlord and securing the future of countless slaves. As the dust settles and the rebellion's forces begin to free the prisoners, Zara stands tall. She's no longer just a survivor. She's a leader. The galaxy will never be the same again. And Zara, the warrior, is ready to lead the charge toward a new dawn of freedom. The final confrontation arrives, and the air crackles with tension. Zara stands at the forefront of her people, her warriors rallying behind her. The once enslaved races are no longer timid, no longer broken. Under her leadership, they've become an unstoppable force, united by the desire for freedom. The battlefield ahead is a testament to their struggle, a sprawling fortress of slavers, the last stronghold of the corrupt empire that has enslaved countless beings across the galaxy. As the battle begins, Zara charges forward with the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. She leads her fighters into the heart of the enemy stronghold with unparalleled ferocity. The slavers, once confident in their power, now face an army led by someone they never expected. Zara, the broken slave, now a symbol of defiance and strength. Her newfound power flows through her as she cuts down enemy forces with precision, her movements calculated, her mind sharp. In this moment, Zara realizes just how far she's come. She's no longer the terrified woman who first met John, the one who had lost everything. She's become a leader, a warrior who has earned her place in this war. Every lesson, every grueling moment of training, every battle fought has shaped her into someone capable of leading an entire galaxy toward freedom. This is no longer John's fight. It's hers, and it's the fight of every person who's ever been oppressed. The tide turns in favor of the oppressed. The slavers, overwhelmed by the unity and strength of their enemies, begin to fall back. Zara pushes forward, her every step driven by the belief that this fight is worth it, that freedom is worth every sacrifice. She can see it now, clearer than ever before. The chains that once bound her people are crumbling, and in their place, a future is emerging, a future where no one will be forced into servitude again. Amidst the chaos, Zara faces a moment of profound clarity. It wasn't just John who gave her freedom, it was herself. She had fought for it, had taken control of her destiny. John's guidance had helped unlock her potential, but it was her own strength, her determination, and her unbreakable will that had truly set her free. The chains had been more than just physical. They had been mental, emotional, and spiritual. Zara had broken them all. and now she was leading a galaxy to do the same. As the last of the slavers are driven back, Zara stands tall. The battle is won, but the war is not over. There are still countless battles to fight, countless systems to dismantle, countless lives to save. But for the first time in her life, Zara sees something she's never dared to believe. A galaxy where no one will ever be chained again. John approaches her, a proud smile on his face. He had once seen her as a broken slave, but now he sees the leader she has become. "You've done it," he says simply, his voice filled with admiration. Zara's heart swells. The journey has been long, and the road ahead is still uncertain. But she knows one thing for sure: the spirit of humanity, its indomitable will, its drive for justice, its refusal to be broken, will carry them through. It's humanity's strength that will guide the galaxy toward a future where freedom reigns, where no one is left in chains. As the cheers of victory echo around them, Zara looks up at the stars, knowing that this is just the beginning. The war is far from over, but the first step has been taken. And with her people by her side, and the strength of humanity behind her, she is ready for whatever comes next.